Welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages Podcast, episode 42. I'm Walt McKinley, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and my partner in crime, Stephanie.
Hey, everybody.
Man, we love that you guys are here. So please just take a moment, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, whatever it is on the genre that you're listening to, so that you don't miss an episode, and share this out for people that you know can benefit from this conversation too, because we can't wait to get into this one. Today, we're talking about commitment.
Ooh.
Man, y'all better be ready. Y'all better be ready to get real with yourself, maybe a little bit too. This is a topic for us as we even prep for this. It's everything in your marriage. And frankly, as important as communication is, and
That's what I was going to compare it to. I was going to say this is right up there with communication. Commitment.
I mean, I would even say you got to have commitment in order to be able to communicate in the way that you need to in your marriage. So for me, I think as we talked about it earlier and as we got ready for this, for me, commitment became an even more, I thought, man, that's probably once you make that covenant, once you say those vows, the commitment that comes after that to being in marriage and being in it to win together truly is number one priority.
Yes, I agree. I was going to say it's definitely in the top 3 for us, I think, where, like we said, communication is usually the one that always mentioned. That's the one that always comes up, but commitment is right up there with it because, I mean, honestly, that's what marriage is all about, is commitment. If you're not committed, then why are you married?
I mean, anything you want to do at life, you got to be committed to. It doesn't matter. You want to be a professional basketball player. Well, you better practice and be super committed to the journey of getting there. You want to be a CEO one day at work. You want to be the best parent you can be. You want to be the best friend you can be. I love fishing. So you want to be the best fisherman you could be. You want to go pro. You have to be ultra committed to your craft. And I think about Tom Brady, how he's the greatest of all time quarterback, NFL player, really. And the one of the best winners ever in the NFL. I think he actually has more rings than everybody. He was so committed to his craft to the point of detriment to his marriage. Because let's be real, Tom Brady was more committed to football and being the greatest of all time than he was to his marriage. And that's why he's divorced now.
Correct. That's what I was going to say. But anyone who's really good at anything, it's because of their level of commitment. Like, look at, what do you call it? Olympic athletes. Like, they're so committed to that sport, and that's why they're the best in the world. You don't become the best at anything unless you're ultimately committed to it. And it's the same with marriage. You cannot have a good marriage if you're not committed. If you don't make that commitment to your partner, then your marriage is not going to work. And that's kind of what we're going to be really driving home today, is how important this commitment piece is. And that this really, I hope by the end of today's episode, you guys will feel like commitment is the number one for your marriage. It's the only thing that does really make it work. Because if you're not committed, you're doomed to fail from the beginning.
And the crazy thing is, the best thing you could ever be committed to, maybe besides your faith, is your marriage.
Right.
It is really the becoming one with somebody else. You got to be more committed to your marriage even than to your children, because if you get a divorce, and let's be real, guys, 52% of our population in America, first marriages end in divorce because people aren't really committed. They're treating it more like a short-term contract that they could potentially get out of the deal from when life gets hard, when things aren't going their way. And you got to ask yourself, are you really committed to your marriage, to your relationship? Or when times get rough, when you're not getting along, when there's seasons in your relationship, maybe you don't even really feel in love with your partner, the commitment is the thing that's going to carry you over those seasons. And we heard a statistic the other day. They said all couples who have kind of that come to Jesus moment, as Stephanie and I have had before in our own marriage, when they've committed fully to their relationship, 80% of those couples stay married, and 80% of those couples are profoundly happier within 5 years of making that commitment to each other. So we cannot underplay, we cannot overstate what commitment really is to your relationship and ultimately to your life.
Right. I'm hoping we can erase the word divorce from your vocabulary. Like that's not even a it's not even going to be a word you even mention in your marriage, because if you're committed, you don't talk about divorce. It's not even an option for you. And that's what we're hoping you get out of this is when you say you're committed, that's it. There's no other exit strategy. There's no, you don't think about divorce. That's not even an option. You figure out how to work it out and make a solution in your marriage to make it work.
And look, guys, don't make something up that we're not saying. We get it. It's hard. We've been married 24 years,
Yes.
man. It's hard. Commitment requires selflessness. It requires putting somebody else's needs above yours sometimes. It
Mhm.
requires seeing the bigger picture and the forest through the trees when you're going through the hardest moments in your relationships, or you're not getting along, or somebody's acting out of character, somebody says something mean, or you're stressed about finances. I mean, there's so many external pressures that are leading people down this path of divorce. But the reality is, those people that get divorced, and let's just be real, if you've gotten divorced and you're listening, you weren't committed fully to your relationship. It says in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. We don't say in health, and when it's better, we're down for the commitment. But as man, you get sick, or I gotta wipe your butt or something like that. When we get old, like I might not be as committed as I think that I am. And I'm being funny, but that's being real and that's being raw. It takes commitment and effort, forgiveness, selflessness, and everything that comes along, vulnerability, everything that comes along with that in order to create a thriving, healthy marriage. And ultimately, that's what we all get married for, is we love our partner. We want to get married. We want to commit to a lifetime, but it's easy to do that when it's good. When times get rough, you really find out
Mhm.
how committed you and your partner are. And we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, we're going to talk about what are some things that we say and do, and what are some ways that we can do things differently from this point moving forward. And then we're going to leave you guys with kind of a bonus at the very end of the show, talking about what is the mentality, one mentality that you could bring into your psyche right now, your heart, your soul, your mind, everything. And if you adopt this mentality, it will not only transform your marriage, but it will ensure that you're committed for the long haul, because it says till death do us part.
Mhm.
Not until you piss me off bad enough, or like I get really annoyed by you, or I look over on my left and I see somebody prettier, and they're younger and the grass looks greener. No, it is literally till death do us part. That is the commitment and the covenant that we made. So stop treating your marriage like a contract. And Steph, you talked about this as we were prepping too.
Well, yeah, this is what I wanted to kind of compare the difference in how you approach your marriage. Because this is, there's some of you out there that are just starting out and might just be getting married or you're about to get married. And there's some of you who are recommitting to your marriage because you had that come to Jesus moment and now you're trying to re restate those vows to each other
Mm-hmm.
and start fresh. And no matter where you are in your relationship, we want you to look at it as compare these two things, which is a contract versus a covenant commitment. And if you think about it, when you're in a contract, it's very transactional. It's like, if you do this, I will do that. And this is how most of us treat our marriage, is like Walt was just kind of saying about how, you know, so if you're doing all the things that make me happy and you're treating me right, then I will stay, or then I will do that for you. It's very contractual. It's only a if then type of situation. When you enter in a contract, you're saying like, as long as you perform this task or whatever it is, this service, then I will pay you. And that's how we treat our marriage is, even down to the simple chores every day, where it's like, if you wash the dishes, then I'll scratch your back. Or, like we start treating it that way where everything becomes a transaction in our marriage, and we're treating it that way versus, no, I'm in this for life. This is a commitment I made to be there no matter what. So even when you're being kind of a jerk to me, it doesn't mean that I turn around and go to someone else or I'm out of this because you're not treating me how I want. That's not how it works. And that's kind of what we wanted to talk about and make you realize, is not to treat it like a contract, but to treat it like this is your partner for life. This is the person you're in love with. They're the one that's going to be there with you no matter what. And that's why, like, we all want that. It's like, if something really bad happens to you and you're not doing well in life, because it happens to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have those moments where either we're really sick or we lost someone we really love and we're depressed and we can't show up as the person that we want to be. Then that person steps in for you and they love you through it and they help you find your ground again. And to know, like, if I did get sick, he's going to take care of me. He will be there for me. He's going to love me through it. That's what we all want. That's what we want to be able to depend on. But we can't depend on that if we're not willing to do it for our spouse. And that's what I think we all need, that reminder that this isn't an option. Like, you didn't enter into this, you didn't say those vows to each other because it's just a only if it works for me kind of attitude that you have. It's because it's that loyalty you want from your partner that you need to also give your partner. Because like I said, there's definitely times, Walt and I have had many, and and a lot of times it feels like there's a lot more of those that happen than the good stuff. So you want to know that your partner is there no matter what, but they're not going to be there if you don't show that commitment. So we have to come at that together in the same way and realize that it's not always going to be good times and they're not always going to treat you right. And you're human. None of us do. I don't always treat Walt the way I should. But he can be understanding about that because of whatever's going on in our life, and have some empathy in those moments and say, you know what? Obviously she's having a hard time right now. So I just need to have some patience and some compassion for her and be there.
But maybe sometimes Steph's being rude and I'm being rude back. And so we're just butting heads on whatever that thing is, right? That argument is that those petty little things that we do to each other when we're married. But we know neither of us are leaving.
Right.
We're committed for good times and in bad, for sickness and in health, till death do us part, to making our marriage work. So when you reach that level of commitment for you and your partner, when both of you guys are committed, you can have disagreements. You can go through a rough season. You can have a season where you're just not getting along very well with your partner. And so you don't feel as in love with them as you normally would, but you're committed to the relationship and the long-term vision of what you guys set out to create. And when you do that, you know you will overcome that season because your life has shown you the ebbs and flows that happen for every single one of us. The commitment to whatever we're doing, in this case, our marriage and our relationship, is what's going to keep you at inner peace, and it's what's going to keep you from looking outside your marriage and doing the other things where the grass is greener on the other side. I mean, this is real. We were talking about it before the show and I was laughing because you guys know I like my sports analogies because I like me some sports. So you think about somebody like, let's say Kobe Bryant, right? They sign a long-term contract with the Lakers. You know that they're totally committed to that team. They're committed to the idea of, hey, we're going to practice together. We're going to win together. We're going to lose together. We're going to work through challenges together. We're going to celebrate successes together. But I'm in it for the long haul, for my career, for the duration of as long as I'm able to play basketball. Versus you got free agent contracts. And I'm not a LeBron hater, but LeBron, he just signs these shorter duration contracts so that he can get out, he can go continue to go try to find another team he's going to win on. But all that's done for him is that's tainted his legacy compared to Kobe staying with the Lakers his entire career. If you want to be a free agent, it just shows your lack of commitment. It shows your lack of loyalty. It shows that you're not willing to lose together. You're only willing to win together. You're not willing to run through the fire together. You're only willing to do it when it's 70 and 78 degrees outside. You're not going to celebrate,
right. Well, and think about how different they're going to treat him as a player when, if they feel like, oh, well, if we start losing and we're not doing great, he's leaving our team. They're not really going to include him in the team like they would if they knew he was in it with them. Like, you're in it no matter what. You're going to win and lose with us. Like, it doesn't matter. We know you're going to be there. They're going to treat you
Mm-hmm.
totally differently than, and the team is going to show up differently if they know that versus he's just going to leave as soon as like something better comes along. Or
Think if you looked at your spouse, and if you're willing to renew that commitment during this conversation we have today, and you're not listening to this with your spouse, we always recommend that you do. Go home, look at your spouse, and say, no matter what's happening around us, no matter what we're going through together in our relationship, I'm not leaving. I'm here to stay. I love you, and I'm committed to us. What do you think your spouse's response would be to you? How
that's
do you
huge.
think they would treat you? Do you think that they would feel more secure inside and more loved? Do you think that maybe they would reciprocate that if they knew you were serious and that was real for you? Hell yeah.
I was going to say, look, yeah, how differently do you show up in your relationship when you know your partner talks to you like that, and you know they're there for you no matter what? And how different, like, so let's say there's a relationship and the one of the partners knows that, or they feel like their partner's going to leave if someone better comes along, and or they're worried about that because they've shown signs, and versus that partner saying that to them and they're in it for the long haul, they're going to show up really differently. Because if they always think you're going to leave, they're going to be people pleasing, they're not really going to be honest with you, they're going to hide things from you that they, because they, if they think that that would make you leave. And I'm sure we all know someone like that, or seen it on a movie, or you see that in relationships where the person will be kind of doing whatever they have to please the other because they're afraid they'll leave. And that's not being true to who they are. They're not showing up as well as they can in the relationship. And you're not going to have that freedom to be who you really are and love freely if you're always thinking that there's a chance they're leaving.
So you have to decide right now. You don't up your commitment to your spouse. You don't try hard. This isn't a game. Are you committed or not? And your spouse ultimately will match the level of commitment you show them. So if you're not getting the commitment, maybe you're not as committed as you think you've been. And that's a conversation, because commitment requires conversation and vulnerable communication that you need to really have with your spouse. So, what are some of the ways that you can keep your covenant? What are some of the things that we do? And what are some things that we can do instead? And so, the first thing is you should never mention divorce, because if you're committed, you're not going to get one.
Right.
And there's so many spouses who will say, well, maybe we should just get a divorce then. Maybe we should just separate then.
Right. And when you start talking like that and you're saying that, the other partner is thinking, oh, so they've got an exit plan. So I'm not going to be as committed because I know that they're not in it with me.
Mm-hmm. And instead, remind them what I just said. No matter what's happening with us, I'm here to stay. I love you. I'm in love with you. I'm super pissed about the way our relationship is right now. I'm hurt and I'm disappointed, but we're going to get through this together because I'm committed to us. And you watch how that dynamically changes your relationship.
Yeah. Next, don't say things that damage your marriage long term. Instead, make plans together for the future. So when we say that, don't say things that damage your marriage long term. It's kind of similar to what he just said, where it's like you don't mention divorce, you don't say things that, well, maybe we should have never got married, or maybe we're just not right for each other, or any kind of comments like that. You're basically saying you're thinking something else. You're starting to think, maybe I should be with someone else. Maybe we shouldn't be in this marriage. And that puts doubt into the relationship, and it shows you're not committed.
It's like planting the weeds, not the seeds,
Yeah,
that
I
lead
like
to
that.
the wrong kind of growth. And there's so many people that say things that damage the relationship when they're angry.
Mhm.
Stephanie talked about in the last podcast, 2 power moves you can have is restraint and emotional intelligence, to understand when you're angry that you have an opportunity to pause and take a breath and come at it from a different angle than that anger is making you come from it at. And if you don't do that, the negative sentiment in your relationship and those, you know what, I'm not even in love with you anymore. Or you're not the same person I met.
Yeah.
I don't even know who you are anymore.
Not the person I married.
They shouldn't be the person that you
Yeah.
married, because you guys should have grown together. You shouldn't expect them to be who they were at 25 when you're 45. It's not realistic. And by the way, neither are you.
Right. I was going to say, let's be, let's take a second there and say, look at your own life, and are you the same person you were 10 years ago? And I hope you say you're not, because you shouldn't be. We all should be growing always. And as you age, you are going to grow and have different kind of experiences and a different level of wisdom, and you should.
And a deeper, more committed love to each other too. That only comes with time. And so,
Right.
Steph, instead of saying things that are going to damage your relationship long term, what should you do in that moment instead?
So we've talked about this a lot on several episodes of this, that make plans together for the future. You should always be reaching and striving for things together, have goals together, even if it's like we said, just making plans for a vacation together, whether that's together or with your family. Like it's just you two as a couple or your family. Um, Planning date nights, doing those kinds of things, anything that brings you together, that you're working together towards something. Do those kinds of things often, because that's what connects you. That's what keeps you in love. That's the kind of stuff that makes you work as a couple, and it strengthens that commitment.
I mean, even this podcast that Stephanie and I do, it doesn't mean that just because you're making plans together, you're doing things together to strengthen your future. It doesn't mean that you're still not going to have little petty arguments in between those. Like we've argued before the podcast has come on. We were having a little moment probably about 15 minutes before this
Yeah.
podcast came on today.
I'm sure a lot of you out there know. There's plenty of you probably that work together also. Any couple who works together and lives together, it's a real challenge that we're really finding out. There's parts of this that really bring us together, and there's parts of this that make us argue because we see things differently. So it goes both ways, but ultimately it does bring us closer together because we're working together on something. And sure, it comes with challenges like anything.
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm not saying you have to do that to be, connected,
Yeah.
but that's why we say, like, make those date nights, plan those trips, go find a hobby that you like together. Like for us, we both like sports, so we've always done things kind of around that. But
Concerts and
yeah, there's all kinds that we go take rides in the Jeep, like we take walks together. It's things as simple as that. But just do things that you do together, and it's your time together, because you definitely need that.
yeah, don't always make it about the macro vacation moments, the expensive things that you do, because not everybody has that kind of money, and neither did we for years. And so do the micro moments, do the little things, take the walks together, go work out together.
Or we had a couple, they called it coffee hour or something like that, where, they take an hour each day, or even if it's 10 minutes, they take like this little break together that they talk, just the two of them, because especially when you have kids, there's so much that they're so much a part of your life, and they're always interrupting, and they tend to take over, and their activities and everything.
You have to find time.
Yes.
Like you're literally searching for time. But if you're doing it together, you'll be intentional
But
about
even
making
to
it.
people that are just working, when you work full time and you both work, and maybe you both work a lot, it's hard to find time together. So you really got to schedule that time in.
All right. So the third one is don't become close friends of the opposite sex. And look, even during the motivational speaking stuff, before we started the podcast together, Steph was supporting me in this, because I talk about healing from trauma and living an extraordinary life because of it. People gravitate to that strength and that power. And so I would have women reaching out to me. But there were times Stephanie told me she would be uncomfortable with that conversation, maybe. And so, do I care about the conversation more than my wife? What am I committed to, going and speaking and doing that kind of stuff? Or am I committed to my wife? And if she's uncomfortable with that, then it's a conversation about, well, what would she be comfortable with? And then being intentional around that, especially guys, when it comes to the opposite sex, because let's be real, nobody
Mhm.
sets out to do anything wrong, but sometimes things happen. And so you shouldn't put yourself in a position to make a mistake, or you shouldn't put your spouse in a position to question that. And that's really important, especially for all you extroverts out there like me who just love being around people. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, or an elephant, you know? And so, I think that that's a really important thing.
Yeah, I'm going to add in there. We say don't become close friends of the opposite sex. This is a tough one for me because, and I've had talks a lot with Walt about this, and even recently, because, especially because we've shared on here a couple different times that there was an emotional affair in our relationship, and so this one is even closer to home for me because there's now a trust thing where
Mhm.
it's hard for me to feel like that's not going to become something else sometimes. And like he said, for what his work has always required him to work with a lot of women, like even in the military, in the
Mhm.
corporate, even doing this stuff, everything has required him to work with women pretty directly. And so it's one of those things where it just helps if you keep it professional and like, especially if you have to work with them or whatever, that and you kind of have to create these boundaries with your spouse because everyone has a different level of comfortability with
Sure.
this. Because, like he said, he's much more of an extrovert than I am. But even I've told him, like, there's times where I can tell that someone taking my action, like they think I'm being too friendly and maybe they're misreading that. And I will back away and I will back off
Yeah.
because you don't ever want to give that mixed message. Like you shouldn't really be texting back and forth with someone like that or having phone conversations or just things where and your level of, you can kind of read that too. If you're starting to feel like you're getting feelings or because you're spending so much time with this other person because you have to, you should find a way to back off or, make it to where you only have to interact with them for those situations. This is a very like you know even it's personal in your relationship, it's for you, like you have to read that and know what's appropriate and what's not.
Well, you got to be honest with yourself about that, and
Hmm.
remind yourself also that your commitment is to your spouse.
Right.
Period. First and foremost, every time without fail. That's what commitment is. It's 100% being all in. So what can you do? And Steph and I have noticed when we feel disconnected in our relationship, that's when people start to wonder, well, oh, they doing something else. They looking some. You start to get all these wonderings and these things happening in your brain where your insecurities start popping out and you almost fabricate things happening in your mind. But look, let's say you really worked on keeping that friendship with your spouse, they know they're your number one, they're your best friend. You go for
Mhm.
Jeep rides, you go to sporting events, you go to concerts, you go hang out, you go do all these things together. There's a security that's really formed in that versus the insecurity that's formed with that disconnection and then having friends of the opposite sex. So,
Right, that's the thing. If you're spending a lot of time with your spouse and you're making them the priority and you're kind of interacting with them all the time, you're not going to have time for someone else and you're not going to be putting it into someone else. But if you find that you're spending more time or you're hiding the fact that you're
mhm.
interacting with this person, then it's probably wrong and that you need to back away. And you have to take the action on that. It's not up to the other person. Like if you can feel that there's something else and you know that that's wrong, like I said, if you're starting to have feelings, then you need to back away.
Well,
And you should probably let that person know.
I was going to say that takes us to the next one. Don't flirt or feel emotional needs with anyone else. And the opposite sex one and this one really do kind of go
Hmm.
together. Um, because what happens is your spouse isn't feeling a need, whatever that is, or it's a rough season for you guys, or you're not really feeling in love because you're disappointed and you're hurt, and you guys have been button heads lately. And then all of a sudden somebody comes along and tells you how great you are and fuels that ego. and provides and fills the void that maybe your spouse isn't feeling or your partner isn't feeling in the moment, it's really easy, because we're all human beings, to go after that feeling you're missing. You're not counting the other 10 good feelings your spouse brings to you. You're just worried about the one that's unfulfilled right now, because innately we're selfish as human beings. And so it's important to make sure and be honest with yourself. You shouldn't be flirting with anybody. You shouldn't be letting anybody fill those emotional needs. You shouldn't be looking at a chick when she walks past you guys and you're having lunch with your wife. Or, I'll see some women do it for their husbands even sometimes, or I'll see some men and they're like, man, she got a nice old booty. And, or the wife's like, oh man, she has a nice butt. But you shouldn't, it's just a respect thing, right? And if you're really committed, who cares? And look, guys, I know we're visual. I know you look. Just don't make it so dang obvious in the moment and be turning your head around. What'd you say, baby? And your wife's over here, and you're like, yeah, hold on, I'm just checking this girl out over here. It's such a bad thing to do, and then you make your spouse feel like they're not good enough. And if they feel like they're not good enough, and somebody comes in and starts making them feel like they are good enough, next thing you know, you're divorced. It really happens. It's not immediate, but it's a slippery slope that happens. And we only look at the event that happened. We don't look at the year or 2 years or 3 years leading up to that, where your relationship just atrophied because you're not doing the things that we're talking about. And so, Steph, in that moment, like, what are you supposed to do in that moment instead of flirting or filling emotional needs with other people?
Yeah, so we say bravely share your feelings and desires with your spouse. So the reason that it's kind of like you're saying, like you end up flirting and filling emotional needs with someone else because you're not actually opening up about the things that are really bothering you with your spouse. Like a lot of people, it's painful and hard to share those deep emotions that you're feeling sometimes with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then by not doing that, you start to share it with someone else. And then you build that connection with someone else instead of your spouse. So really you need to find the courage to open up about the stuff that is actually bothering you. And it does take courage and it is hard.
Yeah.
And trust me, we we have been through a lot of these kind of conversations. And even sometimes when we think we're even addressing the hard stuff, we're not even really getting to the really hard stuff. Like, because there's some stuff some of us push down so far or suppress so much that you're just not willing to open up about it. But we do have to do that kind of stuff if we want our relationship to work. And your spouse wants and needs that from you, because they can't truly be there and show up for you in that way if you're not willing to be honest about what your feelings actually are. And we need to know those emotions, because it totally does help us know, okay, when to back off, when to lean in more, when to, like you show up totally differently if you know the real reasons behind how they're feeling and the way they're acting. And, so that's what I mean about, and I kind of stress this a lot on men because I typically, and this isn't always the case, there's always exceptions. Typically men are it's a little bit harder for them to show that vulnerability, to let people in and share their emotions, because it feels like being weak, and that's what they've been taught not to do. But for the woman in your life, she is not going to view you that way. She sees that as a strength. She wants to know that about you.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to love you through it. So, and this could be vice versa. So you can flip that. Sometimes it's the woman who has a hard time sharing, and because of bad things that have happened to her and pain she's been through, and she's been hurt before. And that's a lot of it is a lot for a lot of us. It's past relationships, it's childhood relationships that they've hurt us so badly that now we're afraid to open up. We don't want to let anybody in because we're trying to protect ourselves. But if you don't let the people you love in, they can't love you like you need to be loved.
So you got to look at it this way: build a bridge, not a wall, when communicating with your spouse. Our words will build a wall faster than anything else will.
Mm.
And our actions will always follow our words. But if we're intentional about being vulnerable, and we're intentional about receiving our spouse's words when they're vulnerable towards us, because that's the second piece of what Stephanie was just talking about. then the communication becomes positive and you can move your relationship forward. And maybe in the moment your spouse doesn't really receive what you said, but because you had the courage to be vulnerable and really bravely share your feelings with your spouse, you've at least planted a seed. You can't control what they do with that. They got to cultivate and water that seed. But at least you've planted it. At least you've been able to say how you felt in that moment. And that's really important too, because holding it in doesn't do either of you guys any good. And so, what's this last one, Steph?
So invest in your marriage daily because you plan to be married until you leave this earth.
That's right. That's what I put. Till you're dead, forever
Till
and
death
ever.
do you part.
Sounds like some scary movie we're getting ready to script
I
in.
know. But yeah, so I just kind of mentioned this a few minutes ago, but do that daily investment. If you can only fit in 10 minutes a day with your spouse, do it. You need that time to talk to each other. It's so important. That is watering your grass.
The compound emotion of investing into your relationship is just like investing money. It's the compounding of that doubles it and it doubles it and it doubles it. And you look over the course of 5 years that you've invested into your relationship, and your relationship is extraordinary. And other people are saying your couple goals, but you know you just didn't get there overnight. You know it wasn't easy. You know there wasn't a struggle. You literally just invested into your relationship over and over and over again, even when the times were hard. And that's what got you to the point of living extraordinary, or it gets you to the point of being divorced. And you got to question your commitment and whether or not you're all in. If you're all in, you're going to invest, period. And that doesn't mean you always invest wisely or you do a great job investing, but the intention is to invest.
Yeah. So, lastly, we wanted to talk about this concept of
Bonus round right now. This is bonus round.
of locking the doors. Meaning you don't have these open doors where, so I'm going to list a couple that I consider open doors, and that is divorce is one. Um, Another door is staying busy with work, friends, or activities instead of dealing with your marriage issues. A lot of us do that. We just stay busy instead of actually facing what's going on in our marriage. And another one would be living as undivorced roommates, where you just agree to be roommates. A lot of you do that for your kids. Like, we'll just stay together for the kids, but you're not actually having a relationship. And so we want to talk about that you have these open doors. And question I want you to ask yourself is, what doors are open or still unlocked in your marriage? And then what do you need to do to shut and lock them? So, are you considering divorce? Are you thinking like, well, this is looking like we can't repair this. Let's just plan to divorce. Or are you just staying busy and you're not paying it, let me just run the kids here and work late and do all these things to stay busy so I don't actually have to talk to him or her about what's bothering me? Are you just living as roommates? Are you doing those things and leaving those doors open? Because if you are, then you're not committed to your relationship. What do you need to do to shut and lock those doors and make it to where you're committed no matter what? Because that's the goal of marriage.
Yeah. You cannot have an escape route. If you have an escape route, when it gets really hard, or you feel like it's dangerous, or you feel like something bad might happen to you, you're going to run outside the escape route. But also closing the doors to your house. I think about this in relation to every night I go lock the closet. I mean, the closet. I go every single night. I go lock the garage door. I go lock the front door. I go lock the sliding glass door. I set the alarm, and I do those things because I want to keep my family safe. I want to keep things from being able to come into my home that can harm it. And so ask yourself, did you lock all the doors to your house? Are you keeping your relationship safe? Are you keeping your family safe from the outside influences that can damage or hurt what is should be most sacred to you?
Mm.
Or are you leaving a door open so that you have an escape route when the times get tough? These are the real, raw, and unscripted questions that we got to ask ourselves. And this is how we create a relationship that lasts legacies. You create a dynasty for your family by doing the things that we're talking about in this, because that commitment is not only for you, it will show your children how to commit to their own relationships in the future. This fire episode today. What? All right. So look, guys, we're going to wrap it up today. So thank you for joining us once again. Don't forget to join our Legacy Driven Marriages Facebook group. Continue to share these episodes with your friends. And I love that we're getting more and more topics in, which is super cool for us. So if you have topics that you want to bring to the table, shoot us a message, a DM. Everything that on every platform is at Legacy Driven Marriages. We're not hard to find. Join the dang Facebook group and get in with other people in the arena fighting for their relationships. But look, guys, until the next time,
get into the arena of your marriage, keep fighting for your relationship, and keep elevating your generational legacy. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Let's go.